Officer Simone Carter stepped onto the polished floor of Precinct 42's headquarters shortly after dawn, her patrol bag slung over one shoulder and her freshly pressed uniform crisp as morning air. She had grown up 2 blocks from the station, watching the district's blue lights weave through her neighborhood on summer nights. Now, at age 28, she wore the badge she'd dreamed of since childhood, a symbol of protection for the very streets that had raised her. Her first weeks on patrol had been a whirlwind, learning radio codes from grizzled veterans, memorizing every back alley and liquor store corner, and earning the wary respect of officers who had seen dozens of recruits come and go. But beneath the handshake greetings and polite nods, Simone sensed an undercurrent of doubt. In roll call, Lieutenant Grayson paused when he read her name aloud and lingered on her badge number before moving on, as if reluctant to trust its legitimacy. That afternoon, during her first ride-along with Sergeant Mullins, Simone witnessed her initiation into the precinct's darker rhythms. Mullins, a burly 20-year veteran, pulled up behind a black sedan, weaving through traffic. "Watch this, rookie," he muttered, stepping out. Without warning, he banged on the driver's window and threw the man to the pavement, no questions asked. Simone opened her mouth to object, but Mullins barked, "Procedural," and cuffed the terrified driver for reckless driving. The passenger, a young white man in a button-down, choked on apologies as Simone's heart thudded with shame and unease. Back at headquarters, Simone filed the paperwork as ordered, her brow damp at the seams. In the locker room, a fellow officer, Officer Bradshaw, grinned at her. "Welcome to real policing," he said, tossing her a stale donut from the break room. But later, when she tried to report the rough arrest to Internal Affairs, she found her email dismissed as overly sensitive. An anonymous senior detective warned her in the hallway, "You're new, Carter. Don't make waves." That night, Simone lay awake replaying the day's events. She had joined the force to serve and protect, to uphold the law fairly for all her neighbors. Yet from the moment she'd walked through those doors, she'd been tested by racial slights in the locker room, by supervisors who questioned her competence, and by officers who saw her not as a sister in blue, but as a potential threat to their unspoken code. As rain pattered against her bedroom window, Simone resolved that she would not be cowed. She would learn every procedure, document every injustice, and speak out, even if it cost her more than a rookie's reputation, because in the bowels of Precinct 42, she had glimpsed corruption built on silence and prejudice, and she knew that exposing it would be the true baptism of her career. The next morning, Simone arrived early, badge gleaming, notebook in hand, ready to chart a course that would test her loyalty, her courage, and her belief in justice itself. Simone arrived for her second week on the streets before dawn, the precinct's fluorescent glare reflecting off her polished badge as she stepped into roll call. She watched Lieutenant Grayson bark orders at a half-dozen officers, then lock eyes with her for a split second, an unspoken warning. When he dismissed the meeting, the squad scattered into briefing rooms, but Simone lingered outside the Internal Affairs office. She had spent the night drafting a report on yesterday's misuse of force, an unprovoked takedown of a compliant driver, recorded in full on her body camera. She pressed her hand against the frosted glass door with Internal Affairs stenciled above it, heart pounding. Inside, she waited while Detective Hayes, an imposing figure with sharp eyes and a reputation for discretion, reviewed her folder. Hayes flipped through the footage, expression unreadable, then looked up. "You know how this works, Officer Carter," she said softly. "We don't air the precinct's dirty laundry. We'll file this under training opportunity." End of story. Simone's blood ran cold. "Officer Mullins deliberately escalated," she insisted. "I have video proof." Hayes closed the folder with a click. "Video evidence or not, you're new. Don't make enemies where none exist." As she left, Simone felt the precinct's walls closing in. In the locker room, she noticed subtle shifts. Uniforms folded away at her locker, whispers that stilled when she entered, sidelong glances from officers she'd greeted days before. During her next patrol, she was reassigned to paperwork, stacking incident reports in a cold office, instead of riding shotgun on the beat. Sergeant Mullins took the cruiser she'd been promised, and no one explained why. Simone's protests were met with polite nods that never became action. Undeterred, Simone began her own investigation. After hours, she scoured dispatch logs for patterns of unofficial detentions and flicked through personnel files, looking for similar complaints. She interviewed the young white passenger from the takedown, who recounted how Mullins had threatened him for not looking like he belonged. She tracked down a whistleblower secretary who confirmed the Vice unit's off-books payoffs from local bars in exchange for ghost shifts, jobs logged on paper but never performed. Each secret she uncovered added another shard to her growing dossier of corruption and racial bias, festering beneath the precinct's immaculate veneer. Late one Friday, Simone met her confidant, Officer Jamal Brooks, a 10-year veteran with a soft voice but a fierce sense of justice, in a deserted side corridor. She slid her evidence folder across the linoleum floor. "I can't keep this to myself," she whispered. "Someone has to blow the lid off." Jamal took the folder, his hand trembling as he flipped to the first page. "If we do this," he said, "we risk everything, our careers, our reputations, even our safety." Simone met his gaze, steel in her eyes. "Then, we make sure it's worth the risk." As the precinct's fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the two officers sealed their pact to gather every shred of proof, expose the clandestine network of prejudice, and restore the honor of the badge they both wore. The code of silence had crumbled, one courageous truth at a time, and Simone Carter was determined to shatter it completely. Under the cover of pre-dawn darkness, Simone Carter slipped into Precinct 42's basement evidence locker, her deputy's ID card borrowed from Jamal Brooks pressed against her chest. The stale air smelled of gun oil and cleaning solvents as she navigated the narrow aisles of metal shelving, her heart pounding with every echoing footstep. Jamal's voice crackled in her earpiece. "You're clear!" The night watch switched shifts 5 minutes ago. She exhaled and moved to the far corner, where unremarkable cardboard boxes were tagged Unit 7, Vice Operations. Last week, Jamal had tipped her that these boxes contained cash count sheets and handwritten ledgers, matching off-the-books payments from the old dive bars that supplied confidential informants. Simone knelt and pried open the top box. Inside lay an envelope sealed with the precinct's own evidence stamp. Bold letters read, "Mullins Disbursement Records." Her gloved fingers trembled as she extracted thick stacks of carbon copy invoices, nightly payoff amounts, bar owner initials, and signatures she recognized. Mullins's scrawl alongside Lieutenant Grayson's. Simone snapped photos with her concealed phone, careful to avoid the overhead sensor. Jamal's whisper came urgent. 10 seconds, Simone. Wrap it up." She tucked the ledger into her coat, replaced the lid, and vanished down the passage just as the overnight clerk re-entered, oblivious. Back in her apartment, Simone spread the stolen records across her dining room table, matching dates against dispatch logs and body cam timestamps. She discovered a chilling pattern. Every weekend between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., Vice Unit officers received unlogged reimbursement envelopes, cash traced back to minibars in seedy neighborhoods. The records even detailed payoffs for silent arrests of young black men, whose charges never appeared in official crime statistics. Yet she knew internal affairs would bury even this smoking gun. Instead, Simone reached out to Captain Elena Morales, the precinct's only remaining reformist. Under the glow of a street lamp, they met in a deserted alley, and Simone slid Morales the evidence. Morales' eyes widened at the lieutenant's signature on the invoices. "This is treason against our badge," she whispered. "We'll need more, something public-facing. Body cam footage showing the payoffs, a confession from someone on the inside." Over the next week, Simone and Morales orchestrated controlled mistakes during ride-alongs. Jamal and other silent allies planted covert recording devices in Mullins's cruiser and in Grayson's office. They documented whispered conversations about dropping files on journalists who asked too many questions and about finding financial backers for the precinct's political allies during election season. Each recording was logged, time-stamped, and encrypted. But the deeper Simone dug, the more dangerous it became. Anonymous threats appeared on her voicemail. "Stop digging or you'll wish you'd stayed silent." And her locker was rifled, her personal items scattered on the floor. In roll call, she caught Sergeant Mullins's steely gaze before he turned away, the corner of his mouth curling into a warning. Yet Simone only tightened her grip on the evidence. Late one night, as she reviewed the last audio file, a Vice Unit briefing revealing orders to arrest black youths on suspicion of loitering to boost stop-and-frisk statistics. Simone understood the full scope of what she faced: a precinct entrenched in corruption, protected by a code of silence stronger than any oath she had sworn. Still, she knew that exposing these truths was her duty, even if it meant risking everything she held dear: her badge, her career, and her life. With resolve burning in her chest, Simone prepared to take the evidence outside precinct walls for the first time, knowing that once she did, there was no turning back. Simone Carter arrived at the Internal Affairs Bureau at dawn, her evidence strapped inside a nondescript courier bag. With her road captain Elena Morales, face set in grim determination, and Jamal Brooks, trailing behind in plainclothes. They presented the ledger, audio recordings, and video snippets under sealed evidence protocol to Detective Serena Hayes, who had finally agreed to review their case in secret. Hayes tucked the files into her briefcase, promising, "I'll convene a covert audit. If this holds up, we'll subpoena the whole chain of command." For the next 48 hours, Simone waited in the precinct's back hallway while Hayes worked. Every footstep echoed like a drumbeat against the linoleum. Then, just after midnight, Hayes whispered through the door's narrow window, "They've frozen the audit. Someone higher up pulled rank. We can't proceed without a court order." Simone's heart pounded. The corruption ran deeper than even she had feared. She realized that only public exposure would shatter the precinct's wall of silence. With Morales' help, Simone arranged to meet investigative reporter Donna Liu at a deserted park pavilion at 2 a.m. There, they transferred encrypted drives containing every shred of proof: Mullins's payoff ledgers, Grayson's signature on hush money envelopes, audio of directives to ignore civilian complaints, and video of racially targeted stop-and-frisk actions. Dana's voice was steady as she spoke into her phone's recorder. "Officer Carter, do you understand the personal risk you're taking?" Simone nodded, eyes fierce in the pavilion's dim light. "I've seen what happens when we stay silent. This city deserves the truth, even if it costs me my badge." Within hours, Dana's expose went live on the news website and social media. Blue corruption exposed. Insider officer uncovers racial payoffs and illegal arrests in Precinct 42. Headlines ran in bold: leaders colluded in payoffs. Black youth targeted for stats. Internal affairs, blocked audit. Local hashtags flared. $, Justice for Carter. $, End. The code of silence. The precinct erupted. Chief Donovan called an immediate all-hands briefing, his voice trembling as he addressed officers who once revered him. Reporters jostled at the doorway. Simone watched through the glass as Donovan denied everything. "These allegations are baseless. We support our vice unit." Behind him, Mullins and Grayson exchanged silent glances, but Dana's cameras captured the raw fallout. Civilian protesters gathering outside the station, families of young men wrongfully arrested demanding answers, and internal affairs agents fleeing the precinct to avoid retaliation. Lieutenant Grayson's phone rang incessantly with subpoenas from the district attorney's office, while Detective Hayes released a statement confirming the blocked audit and pledging her cooperation. That afternoon, Simone took a deep breath and donned her uniform. She walked the beat in full view of the media, radios crackling, cameras rolling, her badge shining like a beacon. "I'm still here," she said into a live microphone. "I took my oath to serve and protect seriously. Now, I serve and protect this city by demanding the truth." By nightfall, the mayor had called for Donovan's suspension pending an independent investigation, and the state attorney general opened a public inquiry. Within 72 hours of Dana's expose, Precinct 42's leadership had lost its shield of secrecy, shattered by a rookie officer's courage, a captain's integrity, and a reporter's resolve. And in the glow of camera flashes outside the station, Simone Carter understood that exposing corruption had rekindled the public's trust in justice, proving that no code of silence can withstand the force of one unwavering badge. Within days of the explosive expose, Precinct 42 lay under a harsh glare of public scrutiny. Protesters, families of those unlawfully detained, civil rights advocates, and fellow officers disgusted by the revelations, lined the steps of City Hall, demanding accountability. Simone Carter watched from the press gallery, as the City Council convened an emergency public hearing on police misconduct. Council members questioned Chief Donovan's oversight failures, citing Simone's evidence of payoffs and racially targeted arrests as proof that a culture of impunity had festered unchecked. Called to testify alongside Internal Affairs Detective Serena Hayes, Simone recounted her journey, from rookie witnessing a brutal arrest to whistleblower risking her career. Under oath, she played audio of Mullins and Grayson discussing secret kickbacks and presented body cam footage of the Ledger raid. "I took an oath to serve all citizens," she declared. "I could not stand by while our badge was used to extort and oppress my community." The chamber erupted in applause when she finished, a rare public endorsement of a frontline officer over veteran leadership. By week's end, the council passed a Public Safety Accountability Act, mandating independent civilian oversight boards empowered to investigate misconduct and subpoena officers, mandatory release of all body cam footage within 48 hours of any use of force incident, whistleblower protections, guaranteeing paid leave and confidentiality for any officer reporting corruption. Simone's captain, Elena Morales, was appointed chair of the new oversight board. Under her guidance, every vice unit disbursement account was audited. Officers found complicit in payoffs faced immediate suspension, and several were indicted on corruption charges. Civil service rules were rewritten to strip tenure protections from supervisors who abused their authority. Back at Precinct 42, a lean, transparent chain of command replaced the old guard. Morning roll calls began with community representatives, briefing officers on local concerns, and every sergeant signed a pledge to respect constitutional policing. Simone spearheaded an internal Ethics in Blue training program, where officers role-played scenarios on bias, interruption, and accountability, then debriefed in mixed-rank groups to foster mutual trust. In the months that followed, precinct-wide data showed a 70% drop in civilian complaints and a 50% increase in voluntarily reported concerns, proof that officers felt safe to speak up. Crime rates stabilized as community members who once distrusted the badge now saw officers as partners, not predators. Neighborhood watch groups joined ride-alongs, and local schools welcomed police mentors into classrooms. At the dedication of the Simone Carter Community Police Center, the mayor lauded Simone's courage. She reminded us that justice demands more than enforcement. It demands integrity. Simone demurred, invoking every colleague, especially Captain Morales and Officer Brooks, who had stood by her. Yet, as she cut the ribbon, the cheering crowd knew that one officer's refusal to stay silent had sparked a transformation that would resonate throughout the department and the entire city for years to come. Within weeks of the Public Safety Accountability Act's passage, Precinct 42 became ground zero for genuine, lasting reform. Simone Carter arrived one Monday morning to find the roll call room transformed. The old motto, "We serve and protect," now shared the wall with a new creed, "We serve with integrity." Beneath it, digital kiosks displayed anonymous tip lines and live dashboards, tracking complaint resolutions, disciplinary actions, and community engagement metrics. Simone joined Captain Elena Morales in launching Operation Honor Code, a precinct-wide initiative blending policy with practice. They began each shift with a 10-minute bias interruption brief, during which officers reviewed real-world scenarios, traffic stops, wellness checks, crowd control, to spot subtle prejudices and experiment with de-escalation techniques. Sergeant Jamal Brooks, who had once cautioned Simone against speaking up, now led one of the most popular sessions, encouraging veterans and rookies alike to share near-miss stories and mentor one another. On Wednesday afternoons, Simone oversaw the Neighborhood Patrol Partnership Program. Pairs of officers and civilian volunteers, teachers, pastors, small business owners, rode the same beat together. Simone watched as Officer Lopez, once fearful of community distrust, and Ms. Hernandez, a local youth counselor, knocked on doors in the Riverview district to introduce themselves not as enforcers, but as neighbors. Residents opened gates warily at first, then smiled when they learned about upcoming Safe Walk programs and free summer basketball clinics co-hosted by the precinct and the youth center. Meanwhile, Detective Serena Hayes convened the first meeting of the Civilian Oversight Board. now empowered to review every sustained complaint. Simone attended as an observer, listening as board members, an attorney, a former school principal, a public health advocate, grilled Lieutenant Grayson on his role in the payoffs, demanded justification for discretionary arrest quotas, and set deadlines for policy revisions. When Grayson failed to satisfy their queries, the board issued a directive. He would shadow Simone on patrol for a week, experiencing firsthand the community he'd long neglected. Back at headquarters, the precinct's Ethics in Blue Fellowship graduated its first cohort. 10 officers selected for exemplary integrity and leadership potential. Each received a scholarship to study criminal justice ethics and community relations at the State Training Academy, returning with fresh ideas on mental health crisis response, restorative justice circles, and trauma-informed care. Simone mentored 2 fellows, challenging them to propose data-driven solutions. One designed a mobile, community listening van that now parks weekly by the city's largest public housing complex. Simone herself spearheaded a new initiative, Project Transparency, in which every use of force incident automatically triggered a brief public statement within 24 hours, summarizing circumstances before full footage release. When such a statement appeared on the precinct's website, community members would receive text alerts linking to real-time updates and an online Q&A forum, moderated by civilian liaisons. At the first such event, dozens logged on, asking pointed questions about last week's non-lethal crowd dispersal. Simone and her colleagues answered candidly, reinforcing trust through openness. As the months passed, precinct statistics bore out the human impact. Civilian complaints dropped by 75%. Community surveys showed a 90% approval rating for local policing, and violent crime clearance rates climbed as residents began cooperating with investigations rather than fearing reprisal. In one symbolic gesture, Mayor Thompson invited Simone and Morales to host the annual Mayor's State of Public Safety Address, traditionally delivered by the police chief alone, underscoring the new model of shared governance. One afternoon, Simone returned to the block where she'd grown up, now the site of a monthly coffee with a cop event. Families lined up for free refreshments, served from a tent emblazoned with the precinct's new crest. A young boy tugged on Simone's sleeve and asked why she'd risk everything to expose corruption. She knelt beside him and replied, "Because a badge means nothing if it doesn't stand for justice." He grinned and ran off to chase a police cruiser that had morphed into a mobile reading room for neighborhood kids. That evening, Simone logged into a secure video call with fellow reformers in 3 other precincts. They shared lessons learned, how to sustain volunteer momentum, secure stable funding for civilian liaisons, and resist political pressure to revert to old habits. As she spoke, Simone remembered the fear that had once gripped her when she first filed her report with Internal Affairs. Now, she realized, the fear had been replaced by a fierce optimism that a department could change, a community could heal, and the oath she took would no longer ring hollow. In the hush of her home office that night, Simone opened a folder labeled Vision 2025. Inside lay detailed proposals for expanding Operation Honor Code citywide, creating a statewide ethics fellowship, and integrating community oversight into national policing standards. As she added final notes, she allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. The movement she'd ignited had grown roots deeper than any code of silence, and its promise of accountable, compassionate policing would outlast any one leader, echoing through every badge sworn to protect and serve. 7 years later, Precinct 42 was unrecognizable from the fortress of fear and secrecy Simone Carter had joined as a rookie. She now stood in the gleaming new community center built on the site of the old Vice Unit office, its walls adorned with murals painted by neighborhood children, each image a tribute to trust reclaimed and justice restored. A large bronze plaque near the entrance bore her name alongside Captain Morales and Detective Brooks, for courage that transformed us. Inside, the room was filled with civic leaders, faith group volunteers, and officers in freshly pressed dress blues. Simone rose to address them not as a lone whistleblower, but as the deputy commissioner overseeing a department where anonymous tip lines outnumbered anonymous threats. She spoke of the integrity dashboard that streamed real-time misconduct data on every precinct's public website, of the Ethics in Blue curriculum now mandated at every police academy in the state, and of the civilian oversight councils that held monthly town halls in every district. Members of the audience, once skeptical community organizers, stood to share personal stories. A single mother whose son had once been profiled now mentors youth in the recreation van. A small business owner who credits Simone's Coffee with a cop series for revitalizing local commerce and lowering petty crime. Even Sergeant Mullins's replacement, a young black sergeant who described how Simone's path gave him courage to speak up when he saw bias in training materials. Each testimony echoed her own words from years ago. That integrity begins when one officer refuses to stay silent. After the ceremony, Simone walked through the adjacent exhibit hall, showcasing tools she helped pioneer. Body cams with automatic integrity checks, bias interruption VR simulators for recruits, and the Democracy Ambulance, a mobile station offering legal advice, community surveys, and compassion fatigue counseling to both citizens and officers. She paused before a display of the original Vice Unit ledger, the smoking gun evidence that had ignited the entire reform movement. A child guided by his mother reached out to touch the glass, and Simone saw in his wide eyes the same mix of awe and hope she'd felt the night she first dared to expose corruption. That afternoon, Simone flew to Washington for the National Public Safety Summit at the White House. She joined the President, the Attorney General, and reform-minded chiefs from across the country to announce a federal model policy for community-centered policing, drawing directly on Precinct 42's turnaround. Cameras captured her shaking hands with lawmakers who had once questioned every word of her testimony. Now they lauded her as the architect of a new era in law enforcement. Back home in her own living room, Simone found a letter from a recruit academy in Alaska. Its commandant wrote that every cadet now studies her case as part of their ethics module, and that a scholarship fund had been established in her name to support recruits from rural communities. She felt the full weight of that impact. A single officer's stand against prejudice had rippled outward to reshape training, policy, and community trust in every time zone. As dusk settled over the city she had once patrolled under suspicion, Simone Carter drove past Precinct 42, windows down, the hum of her patrol SUV blending with distant laughter from the new recreation center. In the glare of the streetlights, she glimpsed a group of officers and residents playing pickup basketball under the same banners that once bore her image. A father waved. Children shouted, "Deputy Carter!" In that moment, Simone understood that her legacy would not be carved in medals or headlines, but in every door now opened without fear, in every call for help answered with empathy, and in every badge worn with the knowledge that courage and integrity endure beyond any single battle. And as she rounded the corner toward home, she allowed herself a quiet smile, knowing that the code of silence had died, replaced forever by a promise she had risked it all to fulfill.